Yes, so let's start properly. Last week we were talking, well, actually, over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about everything to do with Valentine's Day. So we discovered that Valentine's Day was sort of thought up because St. Valentine, or Saints Valentine, plural, were both were martyred on the 14th of February, which was a very convenient date for the church to essentially kick out the ancient Roman festival of Lupercalia, which was all becoming a little bit out of hand, and replace it with a sort of a religious festival rather than a pagan festival. And we discovered that we don't really know who St. Valentine was. There were two contenders, if you recall, and they might be the same person, both buried in around about the same place, but who knows? So Valentine has been appropriated, but when was Valentine's Day first associated with romance and love? Before we come on to this image, if you remember, also last week I was saying, well, it was first associated with romance and love back in 1375. And where did this association come from? This association came from no other than our lovely Chaucer, who wrote about Valentines in his poem, I guess, Parliament of Fowls. And he wrote something about Valentine's Day, when every bird comes to choose their mate. So end of the 14th century, all right, every bird is choosing his mate. Why can't people choose their mates as well on that date? Oh, yeah, maybe they can. And so this idea really began on the in the late 14th century, as far as we're aware. At least these are the first records. Also in France, Charles VI, we're going to come back to him in a second. Charles VI, he signed a charter that was all about having festivities and feasts and romantic poems and so on the 14th of February. So he sort of signed the Valentine's Day Charter, if you like. But who wrote the first Valentine's cards or Valentine's notes? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So that's why this guy has been hanging around very patiently for the last few minutes in his lovely red robes while I just catch us up to date, because he is one of the first contenders. So this is actually Charles I of Orleans. And Charles I of Orleans was a member, you can see from this image, if you know anything about late medieval costumes and about chivalric guilds, he was a member of the Order of the Golden Fleece. Of course he was. Obvious, now you can see it. It's all in the necklace. There are loads of these images, all in a 15th century book. Loads of different people all dressed in these very similar robes. What you can't see very well is that up in the top right hand corner, because I'm covering it, but actually matching very very can I say, what you can't see is that in each of these images is a coat of arms. So here's a coat of arms here. So this is Charles I of Orleans coat of arms. Is it looking at all familiar? Any, I was going to say alarm bells, but any bells ringing? The blue background with the gold fleur-de-lis. I've already mentioned actually the person that we've seen this in relation to. It's all to do with Charles VI. If you remember, and actually Silly, is that even a word? rather unhelpfully, I didn't put an image from a few weeks ago of Charles VI in here, but it was his coat of arms. It was the coat of arms of the King of France, the Burgundian King Charles I, who, if you recall, was referred to very unfortunately as Charles the Mad. That was because he suffered quite probably from paranoid schizophrenia. I mean, he definitely suffered from something, and from all of the notes and documents that we have, it seems that it was probably paranoid schizophrenia. So poor guy. So he was the one, if you recall, who loved festivities, so also started this charter for Valentine's Day, and his wife was always trying to distract him from his madness, and so he was the one for whom they threw the Bal d'Ardon. I think I do have an image of that. What did I do? I'm sure I had that. Oh, never mind. Anyway, the Burning Man Festival. Burning, which sounds like it was a great thing. It wasn't at all. It started out as a great thing, but it was where his some of his followers dressed as, or some of the men of the court, sorry, and the king himself dressed as wild men, and they all took part in festivities, but unfortunately for them, their costumes were highly flammable and they were set on fire by mistake, and he had to be saved by the 14-year-old Duchess of Berry, who recognised the king and basically put him under her skirts. On who caused this fire? This is all pertinent to this fellow here. Who caused this fire? The King Charles VI's brother. Are you keeping up? That's a lot of family history, isn't it? Charles VI's brother, Louis of Orleans, was the guy who came in brandishing torches and set the whole place on fire. So who's he? So this little fellow is not little fellow at all. He is the son of Louis of Orleans, so the brother who brandished the torch, and he is the nephew of Mad Charles VI of France. So he's known as Charles I of Orleans. Now, you might sort of be able to kind of figure out from this whole I've made it quite convoluted story, that Charles VI and Louis I didn't necessarily see eye to eye, and that is absolutely the case. So Louis I was the head of the House of Orleans, Louis of Orleans, so he is Charles I of Orleans, and Charles VI was the head of the House of Burgundy. And that matters because basically their fractious relationship started a civil war in France. We're talking the very beginning of the 15th century. And so this civil war is raging, but in the meantime, there's this whole other war, and I promise you I am going to get to Valentine's cards in a minute. There's this whole other war going on that you might have heard of. It's the 100 Years' War that France was fighting with England. And so during the 100 Years' War, this guy here, Louis I, was captured at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415 by the Burgundians, and he was imprisoned in the Tower of London. And it is from the Tower of London that he wrote a letter. So it's not really, it's more of a poem really. This image is in a book of poetry by Charles I of Orleans. So he wrote a letter to his new wife, Bonne of Armagnac. What a great name, Bonne of Armagnac. And he writes in this letter, I'm just going to quote again because I will get it wrong. God forgives him who has estranged me from you for the whole year. Poor thing. I am already sick of love, my very gentle Valentine. So he writes this in 1415 from the Tower of London, and this is thought to have been the first, well, it's the first recorded Valentine note. So not really a card. I'm sure that if he could pop down and get a Hallmark card or something, then he would have done, but he couldn't. So this is an image from his book of poetry, where all of his letters are published. Many of his letters are published, or his poems are published, kind of amount to the same thing. If I do a little close-up, so here he is here, writing those very words. Or maybe not. He kind of looks like he's on a big old typewriter or something. Or maybe a keyboard. He looks like he's playing a keyboard. But I think this is him writing his letter to his wife. And then here he is at the window. Can you see him looking out? I don't know, maybe he's thinking about her. So maybe he's looking out first and getting inspiration before he writes the letter. But then here he is actually giving his letter to a courtier or somebody who was able, a messenger, probably not a courtier, a messenger, who was then able to convey the letter to his wife, who was back in France. Here she is, if you're wondering what his wife looked like. She's there in the blue, not with the fancy red hat on, but with a lovely black hat on with feathers. And this is Charles I again with the black hat. Sorry, Charles I isn't with the black hat. Charles I is with the red hat. And they're getting married. So this is an image of their very happy wedding day. Guess where this image is? It's a very beautifully painted image. So this is by the de Limburg brothers, who, if you recall, painted or illustrated the Très Riche Heure for the Duke of Berry. The Duke of Berry, that horrible old very wealthy but not very nice patron, who we met, oh my goodness, months ago now. He's the one where we looked at the image with the peasants showing their bits. I don't have an image of that either, so you can go back and have a look if you're interested. So this is Charles I marrying Bonne of Armagnac. Unfortunately, when he is writing this letter here, he hasn't seen her for a year. He is in fact never going to see her again. He doesn't know that at the time, but he is imprisoned, not in the Tower of London, but under house arrest for 25 years. So he doesn't manage to go back to France while she's still alive. She dies while he's in prison. So it's a shame. So that's the first known Valentine's note to a loved one. The first Valentine's note written in English was a little bit later, and that was by a lady called Marjorie Bruce, who writes to her fiance in 1477. This is from Norfolk, and she writes to him, please do marry me, don't renege on the wedding. And the reason that she's all worried is because apparently her dowry is going a bit wrong, and there's wrangling over the dowry. So she's worried that the wedding's going to be called off, but luckily it's not called off. She does marry her love, John Patton, I want to call him, but I can't be absolutely sure. Anyway, so this is a letter from her, and you can see this image. I didn't make this. This is courtesy of the British Library, but where the letter is held. But you can see that there's a box there with the word Valentine emphasised. So she writes to her Valentine there. There's also a poem from the 15th century that was written as one of the earlier Valentines, not the earliest, but one of the earlier Valentines, that was written by a Benedictine monk called John Lydgate. He writes, so guess who? I'm going to turn these images off. Who John Lydgate writes his Valentine to. He's a Benedictine monk. I'm going to put comments back on. So who does he write? Who does a Benedictine monk write a Valentine to? I'm just going to wait until someone answers. And it is the bloody obvious. It is the obvious. I hope you all got lots of Valentine's cards, by the way. Obviously, I got so many that the postman had to just leave the sack outside. Come on, Andrew. You know who a Benedictine monk wrote a Valentine's Day card to. I forget about the delay in these. The Virgin Mary, yes, he did. He did. Oh no, not the Pope, but the Pope would have been the second choice. But yeah, he wrote to the Virgin Mary. It's like, I think he was kind of missing the point, wasn't he? It's, I just, yeah, it's what happens when you cross someone from the religious orders with a chivalric tradition. They follow the chivalric tradition, but they have to write to someone like the Virgin Mary or the Pope or a Mother Superior from the abbey next door. Who knows? So we are at the end of the Valentine's episode. Hello, James Travels, James F. Travels. I'm really sorry. We're just right at the very end now, but join us next week. Who's in for a disappointment? The Pope. Who's in for a disappointment? Oh, wait. That's a message from Andrew. So we are continuing with a little bit of Valentine's information, that makes it sound really boring, on the Valentine's theme next week. Bit of a change of tack, because next week we're just going to have a little look at Cupid, who is very often bound up with the idea of Valentine's Day, but we're gonna have a little think about Cupid next week. So if you haven't seen it, the sender of the card, yes. In for a disappointment, the sender of the card, yes. If you haven't seen, I've got what I'm calling the Elevenses blog on my website now. So that's at beyondthepilot.co.uk. So you can be reminded of any of this with some of the images. I will, of course, put this video up afterwards. We just edit it a little bit, so it'll either be probably be tomorrow or perhaps at the weekend this week. But it will. Don't worry, it will be there. Yeah, it's all going on here. I hope you're all happy and you all had a lovely Valentine's Day, and I hope you all have a lovely day and a lovely weekend. And thank you very much for joining me. I will see you next week. Bye.